I'm Drew Mickelson at the state capitol in Olympia, where there could be some major changes to the state following this November's election. There are 4 statewide initiatives that could bring about big changes to state policy, including repealing the state's Climate Commitment Act and the capital gains tax. King 5 News has dug into all 4 of the initiatives. Here's what you need to know.
Climate policy on the ballot this November.
There's been a lot of dishonesty in how this thing was rolled out.
Brian Haywood of Let's Go Washington is the driving force behind Initiative 2117 to repeal the Climate Commitment Act.
2117 is so shocking, it's so extreme. It needs to be defeated.
Reuben Carlisle is the former state senator behind the initial legislation. The initiative would end the state's cap and trade or tax programs, which essentially charge top polluters for carbon emissions to help fund state programs. But Haywood argues this is all driving up gas prices through hidden taxes. Carlisle says there's no evidence of that. In nearly 2 years, the state has made $2 billion. Carlisle points to losses of more than $5 billion if they're repealed. Polls show that convincing voters to repeal the legislation has been challenging.
Those who want to repeal some of these acts by the legislature have not really done much of a job to explain why the actions of the legislature should be reversed.
It's expensive to get measures on the ballot, and they haven't had the same amount of resources to push for their passage.
Haywood has brushed off criticism for not having a solution to what he insists is broken.
If I wanted to go and make the program, I would run for office. And it's not what I'm doing right now. I'm fixing something that is hurting everybody.
Remember, voting yes is a vote to repeal, to remove the Climate Commitment Act, and voting no is a vote to keep current policies in place. In our exclusive poll, many voters said they don't understand the issue or know enough about it.
The initiative process is an important part of our representative democracy, our constitutional republic, so I have no problem stepping up and having a real conversation with the public.
Initiative 2066 is a direct response to House Bill 1589, signed into law on the last day of this year's legislative session.
We don't have a choice here. Mother Nature is making this choice.
House Bill 1589 does not ban the use of natural gas, but it does pressure utility companies, specifically Puget Sound Energy, to move away from fossil fuels and towards the state's goal of 100% clean energy.
I don't think it's the state's business dictating what sort of energy source you have.
Brian Haywood and the Conservative Political Action Committee Let's Go Washington are spearheading Initiative 2066 and 3 others on the ballot. Supporters like the Building Industry Association of Washington fear a future natural gas ban in the state. 2066 would stop the state from limiting natural gas services to homes and businesses.
We will not go backwards.
Opponents argue it would force utility companies to invest in outdated technology, and the cost would be passed on to families.
These programs that reduce energy costs and reduce the number that people see on their bills allows people to not have to make those difficult decisions between paying their rent, buying their groceries, and paying their bills every month.
If the initiative doesn't pass, starting next year, large utility companies can no longer offer rebates for customers to purchase natural gas equipment. Utility companies have until 2027 to consolidate its gas and electric services into one. By 2031, utility companies can't use heat pumps with gas backups. Haywood argues some areas would suffer.
If you're living in an all-electric building in downtown Seattle and it hardly ever snows, then that might not be a big deal. But if you're anywhere, you go on the east side of the state where it snows, electricity goes down and you'll freeze to death.
We expect that infrastructure is going to get more strained if we don't make plans for a future as climate change gets more severe.
Kathy McCall recently moved in with her 87-year-old mom who has dementia. She's one of the 820,000 unpaid family caregivers in our state.
She has, challenges doing the basic things like making a sandwich or remembering what she was doing.
As the advocacy director for AARP Washington, she says 70% of us will need long-term care, something health insurance and Medicare won't cover. That's why AARP is among the more than 140 organizations fighting to protect WA Cares Fund.
7% of the population can actually afford long-term care. And so this program provides for middle-income families and for families that struggle to think how they're going to care for a loved one as they age or if they have a disability.
In July of last year, workers in Washington began paying 58 cents for every $100 they earn to walk hares. People can receive up to $36,500 to pay for services like in-home care, to help with cooking, bathing, or getting around the house. Benefits will be available after contributing for 10 years or 3 out of the last 6 years if you have a sudden need. People already close to retirement would get partial benefits. Workers had a small window to opt out, and nearly 500,000 people did by getting their own private insurance.
But if you look at who opted out, it was anybody that worked in a corporation that had a on-the-ball HR department that could help them get out. But that meant welders and gas station attendants and waitresses, and anybody sort of in the service industry without that infrastructure is stuck in the program.
Brian Haywood with Let's Go Washington, which is behind Initiative 2124, believes voters should have a choice. Voting yes would end mandatory participation in the program, which he says hurts disabled workers who can't work enough hours to benefit, and women in particular.
If you're a woman and you graduate from college and you work for 9 years, you got to work 10. If you only work for 9, and you stop to raise a family for 5 years, you have to go back to ground zero and work another 10 years.
All of us, family caregivers.
But opponents of I-2124 argue the initiative actually hurts women because many leave their jobs to care for loved ones. And making walk hares optional will essentially kill the program.
This is not about an opt-out. It's not about choice. And in fact, they're taking away people's choices, their choice to determine how they want to use this long-term care benefit.
We're talking about I-2109, the proposal to reject and repeal the state's capital gains tax. It took effect last year, if you haven't noticed, and it levies a tax on 7%, a tax on the sale of exchange of long-term assets like stocks and bonds. It does not apply to real estate transactions. Now, most of us don't have to really deal with this tax because it covers gains above $262,000 per transaction. In other words, if someone had $263,000, they would have to pay $1,000, or I should have to pay 7% on that, $1,000 above $262. So last year, revenue was actually down for this tax, but it still brought in $433 million in revenue. All of that money going to the Washington Education Legacy Trust account. Teachers are the ones most outspoken against this tax, and state and national unions are among the big donors to try to prevent 2109 from passing, so they can keep money into education. I caught up with Jessica Olson. She's an elementary school teacher on Mercer Island and says since the capital gains tax has been collected, more student education, special education students have had access to her class because of extra funding for paraeducators.
We need additional supports in order to help these other students, these new students in our classroom, access the general education that they deserve without also burdening our middle class with more taxes. And I think this capital gains tax really answers that question nicely.
But those who want to repeal the capital gains tax says it has more harm than good because it is a backdoor income tax, they call it. Vijay Bonapati is a software engineer and spokesman for the I-2109 campaign called Let's Go Washington. He says all the tax does is punish success.
I think having a capital gains tax is a big disincentive for people to come to our state now, and I think that's going to do tremendous harm to our economy going forward. I want people to think about what would our state look like if we hadn't had Amazon, if we hadn't had Microsoft founded here. It would be a completely different state. We benefit from the best and brightest coming to our state.
Ballots need to be filled out and signed and either placed in a drop box or postmarked by 8 p.m. on Election Day. If you would like a list of the ballot drop box locations, you can text the word ballot to 206-448-4545 and we'll send you that list. Reporting from Olympia, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.